Hello, and welcome to the Banknote Den's presentation of The Many Faces of Money, where we take a look at the depictions of world banknotes and present them in short, informative, bite-sized videos. Today, we'll be taking a look at Moldovan banknotes featuring Stephan Cel Mare, or Stephen the Great. Stephan Cel Mare ruled Moldova for 47 years, from 1437 to 1504. During his reign, Moldova experienced perhaps its greatest time in history. Stefan was able to defeat Turks, Tartars, Hungarians, Poles, and other enemies, though this was not a lasting victory for Moldova. Stefan was born into the house of Bogdan Mușat, a noble family which founded the Principality of Moldavia. This family was torn by internal power grabs, and there existed a civil war in the years leading up to Stefan's reign. As a child during the Civil War, Stefan was sent to Transylvania and placed under the protection of General John Hunyadi. About a year later, Stefan was sent to live with his cousin, Vlad III, who would later become known as Vlad Țepeș, also known as Vlad Dracula, and Vlad the Impaler, and who would later serve as the inspiration for Dracula. Stefan's cousin, Vlad III, lent his support to him and gave him 6,000 horses and men to enter into Moldavia and roust out Petru Aaron, who had been victorious over Alexandru Sărbun in the Civil War. Stefan defeated Petru Aaron, who fled into Poland, where Stefan pursued him, but was unable to apprehend him. Out of 36 battles, Stefan was victorious in 34 of them, defeating Hungarian, Polish, and Ottoman attempts at invasion. But by 1486, after continual attacks from neighbors, he had to sign a tributary state treaty with the Turks, which gave Moldavia the right of a semi-autonomous rule, but recognized the Ottomans as suzerain, that is, having ultimate ruling authority. Stefan's reign in Moldavia was hard-won and always under attack, but his piety allowed several churches to be built, establishing religious edifices after each major military victory. Stefan died in Suceava, a main residence of Moldavian princes, and he was even canonized later on. He is buried in the monastery of Putna, which was built and dedicated to the Virgin Mary by Stefan in 1470. After his reign, Moldavia was constantly being threatened by war from its enemies, and together with Transylvania and Muntenia, now in Romania, protection was attained through alliance and unification beginning in 1593. Moldavia, like most European countries, had a complex history, being placed under the rule of several other governments over time. The Principality of Moldavia would fall under the Russian Empire and was called Bessarabia in 1812. After World War I, it was united with Romania until 1940, when it was ruled by the Soviets and was known as the Moldavian SSR. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Moldova was able to declare its independence as a republic in 1991. Moldovan banknotes feature Stephan Cel Mare on the front of all of its banknotes, many of which depict churches and monasteries that were important to Stephan Cel Mare during his reign. The back of the 1 leu banknote has a vignette of the Capriana Monastery. The grounds also have artesian wells and pavilions. It is said that there is even still a large oak tree where Stephan Cel Mare evidently took rest after a battle. There are 3 churches on site. The first building of the monastery complex is that of the Church of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin. It is the oldest existing church in Moldova. As with such places, there are legends and lore that may or may not be true, but this one has a ring of truth to it. Before the monastery was built, Stephan Cel Mare would often use the woods to hunt deer. His hunting party had once driven a deer to exhaustion, and Stephan was getting ready to make his shot. But just then the animal lowered its head, and Stephan had a feeling that it had bowed to him. This caused Stephan to take pity on the poor creature and spare its life, and so they rode away. Some hours later, a courier came to the hunting party and informed Stephan of his daughter's birth. Later that night, Stephan is said to have had a dream that there should be a monastery erected in the woods, and when it was constructed, it bore the name made of both the deer, called a capra, and that of his daughter, Anna. The first known record of the church is dated April 25th, 1420. Yet Capriana is still an active monastery with novices, monks, and priests, though it was used as a warehouse and a school during the Soviets' communist rule. The 5-lay note depicts the St. Dumitru Basilica in Orhe, an Orthodox church whose construction was completed in 1636. The interior of the church has many icons and paintings on the walls, many of which depict biblical stories in the Eastern Orthodoxy. Its construction was done during the reign of Vasily Lupu, after the time of Stephan Cel Mare, and served as a major religious center in the eastern region, helping to bolster the Christian faith and customs from the influence during the Ottoman Empire's suzerainty. While many religious buildings were closed or faced alternative uses when the Soviets were in power, St. Dumitru Church was able to stay open during the communist rule. Today, it is still an active church which remains open every day for visitation. The 10-lei banknote has the Hrjoka Monastery on it. As an Eastern Orthodoxy monastery complex, Hrjoka houses several buildings within its walls. Originally a prayer house built in 1740, it eventually attracted some monks from a nearby monastery, and it soon developed into its very own monastery. It is still an active place of worship and is open daily to visitors. On the 20-lei banknote, we find the Soroka Castle Fortress, part of a medieval chain of castle fortifications stretching along the Dniester River, which runs through Moldova. It's likely that the original fortress was started in the mid-1300s when a small wood fort was erected to protect a strategic Dniester River crossing. Some difficulty in dating is due to the many wars that were almost a constant occurrence during that era of history. The stone edifice shown here is better known. It was built between 1543 and 1546 under the direction of then leader Petru Rares. Construction of the castle required stone masons and architects to be imported from elsewhere, and it is thought that, due to the design of the castle, these workers came from England. Indeed, there is a marked similarity to the ruins of Restormel Castle in Cornwall, England. The Soroka Castle Fortress has undergone restoration, and there are now roofs on top of the towers, giving it a different look than the earlier depiction shown on the banknote. The first issue of the Moldovan leu was in 1992, issued in 3 banknotes of 1 leu, 5, and 10 lei banknotes, all of which have the same design but different colors and denominations. Each of these also depicts Soroka Castle on the reverse. The Hirbovac Monastery is found on the back of the 50 lei banknote. This monastery originated in 1730 by Constantine Carpus. It suffered at least 3 destructions by Ottoman incursions, which also destroyed historical records housed within. It was later rebuilt in the 1800s. In 1962, during Soviet control of the area, the monastery was seized by the government and a partial destruction of the complex occurred. Church bells were removed and many icons and monastical records were burned. The communists turned the monastery into a handicap school, and the temple turned into a stable. In the late 1980s, restoration of the monastery slowly began, and in 1992 the temple was opened for worship after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Tighina citadel is illustrated on the back of the 100 lei banknote. In 2023, the United Nations Development Project completed a conservation effort which helped the Tighina citadel, or the Bender Fortress, by preserving the eastern wall, complete restoration of 3 of the citadel's towers, and other structural items that were threatening to fall over. The effort used construction techniques and materials of the original construction effort and used over 4,490 cubic feet, or 127 cubic meters, of mortar, which was manufactured using the original time period formula and used in the conservation effort. The citadel is thought to have been originally constructed in the 12th century as an earthen and wood structure, but the only surviving document during the time of Stephan Cel Mare refers to there being a customs guard in Tighina, not a citadel or a fortress. The first mention of the fortress on record comes from the Moldavian Polish Chronicle during the 16th century, which mentions it in reference to the Ottoman Empire taking possession of the fortress by Sultan Suleiman. The citadel as it is now was built in 1538 after Suleiman's conquest of the area. It was then renamed Bender Fortress. The fortress survived multiple attacks and sieges until it fell to the Russian forces in 1710, then again in 1770, and a third time in 1812. The Tighina citadel, or Bender Fortress, is now under the control of the Transnistrian Pridnestrovian Moldavian Republic, which is a breakaway nation that is unrecognized internationally, but it does control a section of land from the Dniester River to the Ukrainian border. Internationally, it is known as Transnistria, but locally it is ardently called Pridnestrovia. The Chișinău Municipal Building is found on the 200 lei banknote. Carl Schmidt was Chișinău's longest-serving mayor, and he served from 1877 to 1903, a 26-year service. He authorized a new city hall, or locally a Duma, to be constructed on the site of a former fire station. The new building was completed in 1902. Chișinău's architect, Mitrofan Eladi, drew up the plans and construction was managed by Alexander Bernardazzi. During World War II, the building was heavily damaged and rebuilt in 1944, when it was destroyed yet again. It underwent reconstruction once more, using historical photos and architectural blueprints. The second reconstruction was completed in 1948, and the city officials, perhaps fearing another destruction, delayed moving in until 1951. The 500 lei banknote shows us the Chișinău Cathedral. The Nativity Cathedral in Chișinău is outwardly a rather plain columned edifice built in 1836 by architect Avram Melnikov, one of the last neoclassical architects of the era. The building suffered damage from an earthquake in 1940 and then additional damage during World War II. Subsequent restorations made some changes in the building design, but it was kept within the neoclassical theme. The dome was rebuilt in 1956, and then again in 1997. When Moldova was under the heavy hand of communism and administered by the USSR, religion was heavily restricted and worship was not allowed at the cathedral. The walls were stripped bare, and the Soviets instead used it as an exhibition hall. Today, it is fully open to religious services, and the walls are painted in traditional Orthodox murals. There is one main altar with two side altars. The main altar is the Nativity of the Lord, while the left altar is dedicated to St. John, and the right altar is dedicated to St. Nicholas. The bell tower is separate from the cathedral, about 130 feet or 40 meters away. It, too, was constructed in 1836, but was demolished in the 1960s, only to be rebuilt in 1998. And finally, the Presidential Palace on the back of the 1,000 lei is the newest building on Moldovan banknotes. The Presidential Palace was built in just 3 years, with completion taking place in 1987. The architectural design by Viktor Iavorsky incorporates modern conveniences with symbolic and functional aspects. The building itself was erected during the Soviet control of Moldova and was intended to house the Supreme Soviet of the Moldovan Soviet Socialist Republic, and given the communists' dislike of religion, it is no surprise that it was built on the site of an old Lutheran church. Once the Iron Curtain fell and Moldova gained its independence, the building naturally converted to house and support the president and presidential duties. Under President Igor Dodon, who served as president from 2016 to 2020, renovations and repairs were undertaken and finished in October 2018, which included a wine cellar, an artificial lake, and a chicken farm. This brings us to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Remember to visit banknoteden.com for more information on these and other world banknotes.